Hi everyone, it's Ashley. I am making a video because someone requested that I do a video on assessment and treatment. Now, I don't have any experience in treatment yet, but I do have a lot of experience in interviewing and assessment. And as a social worker, it's very, very, very important that you have interviewing and assessment skills, and they have to be on point. They have to be great, and no one starts out great, but as you progress in your career and you practice, then you can become great. So, few things I want to get out the way. I did fix the smoke detector, so hopefully there won't be any beeping in this video. um, also, this video is not necessarily going to help you prepare for the license exam, but it's still informative as far as social work goes and being a social worker. So, if you watch my other videos, you know that I worked with families that were homeless in transitional housing. And so my primary role there was the intake coordinator and also a case manager. And so I did all of the intake for all of the families that came through. I was at that job for 4 years. And so I've interviewed hundreds of people, and it was always one-on-one. It was always, some took 30 minutes, and very few took 2 to 3 hours, because a lot of times it was the first time that a person was coming to tell their story. I was the first person that they told their story to. And so, excuse me, y'all. I learned a lot. I honed my skill, my craft a lot as far as interviewing. And so what I did was I keep first of all, I keep everything. I have a big notebook that I keep everything in, from grad school to my previous jobs. Anything that will help me in my career in the future, I keep in this huge binder. And so I dug through it this morning, and I found this assessment that we used to do when I was working at that place that I was telling you about with families that were homeless. Now, I started working there in 2011, and I graduated from undergrad in 2009, and I had only a bachelor's degree in sociology with a minor in criminal justice, and I was not very experienced at all. I had previously worked for a safe home for victims of domestic violence for only like 5 months. So that was all of my professional experience. And then I went straight from that job to the one working with the families. And so this form is very, very blank. If you see it, it was one of my first ones, and I did block I used whiteout to block the name of the applicant, of course, because we want to protect their privacy and not breach confidentiality. But very minor notes when I first started out. Not a lot on the paper at all, but this is one of my very first ones. I tried to find one that I thought I brought with me before I left that job in 2015, which was 4 years later. And I mean, I had grown so much, the whole page would be filled with writing, like all over here, front and back. But I couldn't find it, so maybe it's somewhere in the box, somewhere deeper. But anyway, I remember when I first started out, like, nobody trained me. They threw me in there and they said, all right, your job is to interview the families coming in, you do the psychosocial assessment, and you determine if they go on to the second interview or not. So I was like, okay, I can do that, you know. But I remember having a conversation with my supervisor who, you know, I would ask him, because he never supervised me. He would just trust me to do whatever. And there was always, I remember one conversation specifically about the silence in between questions, because nobody likes that awkward silence. And so I would ask him, what do you do when there's that awkward silence? Like, what do you say? And he was a counselor. His specialty was alcohol and addiction. Very knowledgeable man. He was older, had retired, and this was his, second job after he retired from working for the state. And he told me, he was like, there's nothing wrong with that awkward silence as long as it doesn't go on too long, and you have to know what to say and when to say it. And so that's why a lot of my paper was blank, because I didn't know what to say, and nobody developed me. And, I would have talks with him every now and then until I finally figured it out. So, and y'all, I just want to say, I did watch a video on YouTube before I made this video earlier this morning, because I wanted to see what kinds of videos were out there as far as assessment. And I came across this video where the two people were doing clinical assessments. They were very professional people, very dressed up, but their dialogue was so boring. And y'all, I hope I'm not ever going to bore you, because I'm giving you real conversation. When I was in grad school, I had a professor who was a clinical social worker, and she had her own practice, and she did counseling and therapy, and she was so boring. And she would tell us, oh, well, you have to, like the movies, you sit there and you ask a question, you have a quiet voice, you take your notes, and this is what you say at this time, and this is what you say at this time. And I was thinking the whole time in class, like, lady, do you work with real people? Because I work with real people who are struggling day to day. And so I guess it's different in different environments. I guess if you are doing therapy, it's different. But when you're doing case management and you work with people that are homeless and they are trying to make it day to day, you have to take a different approach. You still have to be professional. But I say that to say this. Any video that I make, y'all, I'm in a white t-shirt. My hair is a mess because I just woke. It's like 9 o'clock, 9:30 in the morning. I just finished cooking breakfast and eating. So this is just going to be regular talk, but it's still legit and it's still accurate information. I am a licensed social worker from a legitimate school, all that. So don't think that I'm just shooting you stuff that's not accurate. But I'm never going to be in a setting just telling you stuff like, oh, well, I'm not by the book. I'm by the book and legit, but I'm not afraid to go off of that. Okay, so enough of that. Now, the psychosocial assessment is an interview where you ask questions about a person's life, their education history, their employment history, their family history, their work history, their housing history, just about their life, and you get very detailed information. Now, you have to have a lot of skills to do this, because anybody can ask a few questions and write down some notes, but you have to be unafraid to ask questions that other people may be afraid to ask. And it took me a while to learn how to do that, or to be comfortable with doing that. So the first page of and I'm just going to use this assessment because it covers everything and it's what I'm used to, but the first question was about the family members. You would list out the people in the household, their ages, their date of birth, just general information. But then I would ask about comments about your family members in your life. But, okay, let me back up. Before I get into all that, and I really don't want to make this a long video, but it probably will be. So hopefully you will bear with me. Okay, when you interview a client, you want to make them feel comfortable with you, especially if you're going to be digging into their life and asking a lot of personal questions. So you bring the client in and you make them feel comfortable. You introduce yourself. I like to be called Ashley. Some people like to be called Miss Such and Such, whatever your last name is. So you introduce yourself. You ask the person how they would like to be addressed. Would you rather me call you Miss Susan, or would you rather me call you Mrs. Williams, or do you want me to just call you Susan? And, because some people get offended if you call them Mr. or Miss because they don't feel like they're old and things like that. So you have to build a rapport with the person. and you inform them on what's going to happen during the interview. So I would say, Miss Susan, I'm going to ask you about a lot of different areas in your life. Some of these questions could be very personal. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but it's good if you do, because it will help me determine better if you're eligible for our program. You would tell them, I'm going to ask you about your family, your education history, your employment history, your health history, and whatever else you're going to ask them about, and let them know in advance that there may be some personal questions. You let them know where the restrooms are. If they need to take a break, that is fine. And I also would tell people this is just a conversation. Now, depending on where you work, it may need to be more formal, but this was a program where people were going to be living there for a period of 2 years. So you need to break down those walls immediately so they can be comfortable if they're going to be in your program, a residential program for 2 years, and coming to see you every week for case management. So I'm like, this is not anything too formal. It's just a conversation between two people. You know, if you have any questions, you can feel free to stop me during the interview. If you need to take a break, just let me know. And people, another thing about interviewing is sometimes people don't have childcare and they will bring their kid. And so have some toys or books or something in your office for the kids to play with. And another thing about kids is they will talk and make noise and cry, and the parent may feel uncomfortable if they start doing that. You reassure the parent that, you know, it's okay, I understand if you need to change your baby's diaper, you need to breastfeed. I've had people breastfeed in front of me. Do whatever makes you feel comfortable. As a social worker, you have to be comfortable with a lot of things that may not be so comfortable. And so what happened was kids would cry and things like that, but I eventually didn't even hear it anymore. Like, kids would be whining and crying, and I would just go on with the interview because it just became like I didn't even hear it. That's how much it happened. But anyway, so I would ask about family members first, and this is where people get detailed. You know, I would ask, where are you from? Where were you born? Tell me about your parents. Tell me about your siblings. Tell me about your relationship with your parents, who raised you. And people will get into their life, and then when someone says something and you want them to expound on it, ask them. You have to dig. You know, people would say, oh, well, I was adopted when I was 5. My grandmother raised me, and I stayed with her until I was 18, and then I graduated high school and I lived on my own. So you may be wondering, why, you know, why were you living with your grandma? You would ask them that, and okay, well, my mom was on drugs, she couldn't take care of me, or my dad friend raped me. And these are things that actually come up in interviews, I'm pretty sure you know. My dad's friend raped me, and I had to go live with my grandmother. Okay, big flag there. Okay, so this person was raped. You have to go there. You have to ask, well, you know, did you receive counseling? How did that make you feel? How many times did it happen? Where did it happen? You know, all of this is gathering information, because this person may not need a 2-year residential program for transitional housing only. They may need counseling for sexual abuse that they never had. So you need to ask all of those questions. You have to be a good listener. You have to be attentive. You can't act like you're bored, like, oh my gosh, this is taking too long, I'm not enjoying this. You have to be attentive. You have to be involved and engaged in the conversation. So when a person is talking and they're saying something for a long time, you do your head nods and you say, and you don't want to do it too often, though, because that's annoying and people think that you aren't really listening. But you want to be attentive, you want to be an active listener, and you want to make sure that you get your information that you need. What else? Now, another thing is that people will try to hide things from you or not tell you the complete truth. And you have to know when they're lying or when they're not being too straightforward with information. You have to be able to dig that out of them. And you have to be able to catch people in contradictory statements. So just something simple off the top of my head. If a person says, oh, well, I was born in New York, and then 15 minutes later they say they were born in California, you kind of need to know how to be like, wait a minute now, you just told me you were born in New York. Confront people on discrepancies in their story. So not in a very confrontational way, but in an assertive, matter-of-fact way. Like, hold on, Miss Williams, you told me about 5 minutes ago that you were born in New York. Now you're saying you were born in California. Which one is it? And that's something that people probably wouldn't lie about, but that's just something that came to the top of my head. Now, another thing is, I would write verbatim everything this person would say. Some people don't do that or can't do that. And when I say verbatim, I mean word for word, pretty much. You have to be able to write and look at them, listen, and you have to multitask. That's how I do it. Some people can jot down notes and remember what happened, but I like to get quotes. It's good to get quotes of what a person said, so that you can be as accurate as possible. Now, everybody will not write verbatim what someone said. That just works for me. So a lot of times you are not allowed to record a conversation with a client because that goes against policy or confidentiality. So that's why I write verbatim. We did not record interviews, so I want it to be as accurate as possible. Another thing is, if a client is going into detail about their story and you have a question for them, you don't want to interrupt them because they're on a roll with a very important story, jot the question down that you had to ask them and then refer back to it later. So you have to be very skilled at multitasking. I would have a separate notepad or sticky notes, and I would write down questions that I want to ask them because I don't want to interrupt them as they're talking if they're talking about something that's very informative. Okay, so that would be a long, long, long time on that part. Once that part was out of the way, then everything else was pretty much easier to get information out of them about. Then we would ask them about their housing history. That would be very important because we need to know where they lived, if they were evicted, why they were evicted, did they owe money, because that would help us to understand why they're homeless. They were evicted, they owe money, they didn't pay the money, they can't get an apartment somewhere else. If they moved around a lot with children, some people move 10 times in 2 or 3 months. That shows that it's an unstable environment for your children because they have to move from school to school, they have to get used to being a new student again, they have to build new friends. It can be very bad on a kid's emotional, life. Then we would talk about financial history. I mean, down to how you budget your money. What debts do you have? What do you owe? Do you have student loans? Do you have money set aside? And you dig. Let's see. Then we would explain, if you are working for a program or something like that, explain the fees and things like that to the person and ask them if they're able to pay those things. I mean, if they have a budget and, do your expenses, what's the word? I don't want to say outweigh. Do your expenses exceed your income? There we go. That kind of thing. You need to know how they spend. I'm sorry if y'all hear that. My sticky key thing is popping up. Then we'll talk about educational history, which is important because we need to know, this person doesn't have a high school diploma or GED. Do we need to refer them to GED classes? If they do they want to further their education? How can we help them with that? Do they have a desire to go back to school? If not, why not? That kind of thing. Let's see. Then we would talk about their employment history. Can you keep a job? Do you keep a job? If not, why not? What kind of skills do you have so that we can refer you to something that you have experience in? How often do you change jobs? Are you staying on a job just 2 and 3 months? If so, why? Are you getting fired? Do you not get along with people? Do you start drama? But you don't want to ask that you want to ask it, but not in in such a direct way. So if someone says that they keep a job 3 months at a time, okay, well, why does it seem that you only keep a job 2 or 3 months at a time? Well, I can't get along with my coworkers, and my boss doesn't want me to come in late because I have a child. Okay, well, then there's another problem. Well, what's your child care like? So asking all these questions will give you more information and lead you to ask other questions that are relevant and that can help you in determining if the person is eligible for your program. Then we would ask about social services. Do you receive food stamps, FI, ABC voucher, WIC, Medicaid? Like, what kind of social services do you receive? How long have you been receiving them? Does this person seem like they're always going to be getting government assistance? What are they doing to get off of government assistance? Now, another thing is, not everybody that receives government assistance is looking for a handout or is using the system, and that is something that really irks me about people who say, oh, well, these are lazy people, these people are using the system. That is true in a lot of cases, but there are also a lot of cases where people are not using the system. People are not, they actually do need help. These people work part-time and full-time jobs, but their wages are not high enough, or they don't have the educational background, but maybe they are in school working towards that. Maybe they were once a thriving citizen, but then they got knocked down by, being laid off their job, or maybe their husband left them and now they can't manage, that kind of thing. So everybody that's on assistance is not using the system, but I recognize and understand that a lot of people do, but that's just something that bothers me. Let's see, what else? Oh, criminal history is very important when you're doing a psychosocial assessment, depending on what agency you're at and what their requirements are. You want to ask straightforward. Have you ever violated the law? Have you been arrested? What happened? And people will try to sugarcoat or not fully get into it. You have to be able to go there with them, because this is very important information if your agency requires that you gather this information. Do you currently have a warrant out for your arrest? If so, for what? Are you currently on probation or parole? If so, we need your probation officer's name and number. We need to be able to contact them. If you're going to be living here with us for 2 years, residential facility, we need to know, in case something happens, who your parole officer is, your probation officer. Do you have any outstanding traffic tickets? Do you have any immediate relatives or a boyfriend or girlfriend currently incarcerated? Was a big one, because, a lot of times there were single moms in the program. Maybe their children's father was in jail. We need to know that. We need to know if this person is in jail because they abused you. Is this person getting out anytime soon? If so, do you have an order of protection or a restraining order against this person? Is he going to come looking for you? Because this is a residential facility that holds 28 families, 100 people at any given time. We don't need, or we want to be aware if a person is going to be angry with you and try to come to the facility and harm you and your family and everybody else. Is there anything else that we need to know about your criminal history? Like, that's always a question for each section. Is there anything else we need to know about your housing history? Is there anything else we need to know about your educational history? Is there anything else we need to know about your criminal background? Because a lot of people say, oh, well, you didn't ask, so that's very important. Substance abuse history was another big one. Do you or any family members currently use drugs or alcohol, even if it's just one beer a night? Our agency at that time was drug-free and alcohol-free. So, if you wanted to drink off-site, that's fine, as long as you didn't come back drunk. But no drugs, period, on or off-site. And we did drug tests at that facility. So, do you have any family members that are in recovery? And we did have people in recovery who were clean and sober they had to be clean and sober for at least 6 months. But, it's day to day with people in addiction. So we needed to know, what do you do when you have an urge to use? And we required people to go to NA and AA meetings, Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, a certain number of times out of the week so that they could stay in recovery and not relapse. Medical history. Now, that was very important because you ask questions about any health issues, including pregnancy, let's see, any mental illnesses. Do you take medications we need to know about? And once I was doing an interview with a lady before, and she was telling me about her medical history, and she told me that she had herpes, and I didn't really need to know that information because it wasn't necessary to know. But I mean, some people will tell you things like that, and you have to keep that confidential, because we did have males on campus who would date the women that were there, and if they chose to engage in sex, that was on them. They're adults. It's their responsibility to ask and to get tested before engaging in a sexual relationship with someone. But we definitely were not able to tell about anybody's sexually transmitted diseases or anything like that. And y'all, a lot of times people will tell you some things. That's the fun part about being a social worker, is because you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes people will say things that may be a little funny to you because you're human, but you cannot laugh in front of someone. And sometimes you can't help it. I had to learn how to laugh with my stomach in these interviews, because people are different. People are funny, but they don't try to come across that way, but they just are. And so how they explain things sometimes is funny, but you have to have a poker face, not throughout the whole interview, but while they're telling you some funny things. And nobody's life is funny, but I mean, just the way people are. You're human. Some stuff is just funny. And, you know, to be a social worker, you have to be able to laugh at yourself and other stuff. But anyway, I had to learn how to laugh with my stomach. So I advise you to learn how to do that as soon as possible if you're going to be interviewing people that you work with in the trenches on a day-to-day basis. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. And I mean, you know, if you have to go over the interview and ask, you know, you have to be able to summarize and paraphrase what people are saying, so you make sure that you have a clear and correct understanding of what the information is that they're trying to get through to you. So, I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Hopefully, you made it to the end of this video. Like and subscribe. If you have any topics you would like for me to do a video on, let me know in the comment box. Leave me your comments. And that's it. So, until the next video, I will see you all later.